For centuries, the northern wind, saturated with salt and cold, has forged a special breed of people for whom war was not just a craft, but the only way to communicate with the world. We are used to seeing them as frenzied barbarians, storming the shores with mad fury. But behind this image lies cold calculation and incredible technological mastery. Their weapons were not primitive clubs, but masterpieces of engineering designed to dominate the battlefield through balance, speed, and deadly geometry. Every axe, every sword, and every shield was an extension of the warrior's arm, a finely tuned instrument on which the life of the entire clan depended. The story we are about to tell goes deeper than the superficial myths of horned helmets and senseless cruelty. It is a story of metal, fire, and the human spirit, capable of turning a piece of iron into a legend that has survived for millennia. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how one inconspicuous detail in the design of the hilt could decide the outcome of battles between entire armies and change the map of medieval Europe. What if I told you that everything you believed in was not true? We are used to thinking of Viking weapons as mere instruments of attack, but for the Scandinavians, they were sacred vessels that held the luck and destiny of their owners. In their understanding, a sword or axe had its own will, character, and even a name, which was given at the time of its creation and sounded like a spell. A warrior did not simply possess a weapon, he entered into a lifelong union with it, where metal could either save its owner or betray him at the decisive moment. This attitude shaped a unique culture of combat, where technical skill was inextricably linked to a mystical perception of reality. Weapons were never mass-produced items stamped out in faceless factories to arm thousands of soldiers. Each item was made individually, tailored to the specific hand, height, and physical strength of the customer, taking into account their manner of movement and fighting style. The blacksmith who created the blade was not just a craftsman, but a mediator between the world of people and the elements of fire and earth. During the forging process, not only coal and iron were put into the metal, but also particles of the ancestors' bones or coal from funeral pyres to convey the power of the clan. This approach made each sword a unique artifact that could not be replaced or copied. For a northern warrior, losing a weapon in battle meant more than just being disarmed in front of the enemy. It was perceived as the loss of a part of one's soul, a loss of connection with the patrons and ancestors who stood behind them in every battle. Therefore, weapons were cherished and decorated with intricate patterns of silver and gold, turning them into works of jewelry art. These patterns, intertwined in endless knots, served not only for beauty, but also as magical traps for evil spirits. The richness of the decoration spoke louder about a warrior's status than any words or titles. It is important to understand that in that era, iron was incredibly expensive, and not everyone could afford a high-quality blade. Most fought with what they could afford based on their status and wealth, often reforging old tools into weapons. However, even a simple spear or axe in the hands of a Viking became a formidable weapon thanks to years of training and a special mentality. They believed in the inevitability of fate, which freed them from the fear of death and allowed them to act with cold determination. It was this inner freedom that made their fighting technique so unpredictable and dangerous for their opponents. Treating weapons as living beings changed the very tactics of combat, turning it into a dialogue between two steel characters. Strikes were not delivered chaotically, but with the intention of breaking the enemy's will, damaging their defense, and forcing them to make a mistake. The Vikings knew the properties of their weapons, their balance and limits of strength, and used this knowledge to gain superiority. They knew how to feel the inertia of a heavy axe and the lightness of a short blade. instantly switching between different fighting styles. It was an art in which brute force gave way to precision and speed of reaction. Interestingly, many types of weapons had dual purposes and could be used both in battle and in peacetime. An axe that chopped wood in the morning to build a draka could become a fearsome weapon in the hands of an experienced warrior in the evening. This versatility was dictated by the harsh conditions of life, where it was impossible to allow things to lie idle. However, there were also exclusively combat models, created only for war and unsuitable for anything else. It was these that were the subject of sagas, endowing them with magical properties and incredible sharpness. The training of a warrior began at an early age, when a boy received his first, often wooden, model weapon. He learned not just to swing it, but to feel it as an extension of his arm, to understand the distance and timing of the strike.
Trope your distance, boy. Let the shield breathe with you.
These games laid the foundation on which the skills of an adult fighter, capable of fighting for hours without fatigue, were later built. Muscle memory developed over years allowed them to act reflexively, anticipating their opponent's thoughts by fractions of a second. In battle, where everything was decided in an instant, this was a major advantage. A special place in this philosophy was occupied by the transfer of weapons from father to son or from leader to comrade in arms. A sword that had been through many battles was considered more valuable than a new one that had just come out of the forge.
This blade has tasted glory. May it serve you as it served me.
I will honor our name, Father.
It accumulated the experience of victories, got used to the taste of battle, and, as it was believed, guided the hand of its owner. Receiving such a gift was the greatest honor and a huge responsibility that had to be justified. This is how a continuous chain of military tradition was formed, connecting generations through cold steel. This deep, almost religious connection to weapons is something that modern researchers often overlook. We look at technical specifications, weight and length, but we forget about the spirit that made these objects alive for their owners. Without understanding this philosophy, it is impossible to understand how small bands of northerners could keep vast territories in fear. Their strength lay not only in their muscles, but also in their absolute faith in their weapons and their destiny. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think about this animation of objects of war and belief in their own will? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about the most recognizable symbol of the Viking Age? Contrary to popular belief, the sword was not the most common weapon. The king of the battlefield was the axe, or battle axe. It was a weapon ideally suited to Scandinavian tactics, powerful, reliable, and capable of piercing even the strongest defenses. But the Viking battle axe was radically different from the tool used to chop wood on the farm. It was a high-tech instrument of war, every line of which was calibrated to deliver the most effective blow possible. A special place in the arsenal was occupied by the so-called Danish axe, or brod, with a wide blade and a long handle. This two-handed weapon had tremendous destructive power, capable of splitting shields and helmets with a single blow. The long handle allowed strikes to be delivered from a safe distance, keeping the enemy at bay and controlling the space around oneself. The blade of such axes was forged very thin to ensure deep penetration into the target and reduce the overall weight of the weapon. Thanks to this, despite its imposing appearance, the broadaxe was surprisingly light and maneuverable. The geometry of the blade was thought out to the smallest detail. The lower edge was often elongated, forming a so-called beard. This feature allowed the warrior to hook the edge of the enemy's shield, pull it toward himself, and open the opponent for a strike. This technique required high skill and strength, but when performed successfully, it guaranteed an instant advantage. In addition, the beard protected the warrior's hand if he decided to grab the axe closer to the blade for close combat. This made the axe a versatile weapon, dangerous at any distance. The technique of fighting with a Danish axe was very different from fencing with a sword or fighting with a spear. The warrior used the inertia of the heavy blade, swinging the axe in wide arcs and circular trajectories. It was almost impossible to stop such a swing. Attempting to block the blow with a shield often resulted in the shield simply shattering into pieces. Therefore, opponents tried to dodge or disrupt the tempo of the attack without exposing themselves to a direct blow. This created a dead zone around the owner of the axe, which no one dared to enter. However, the use of a two-handed axe also had its drawbacks, the main one being the inability to use a shield. A warrior with a brodex became vulnerable to arrows and throwing spears, so he was usually covered by his comrades. In battle, such fighters often stood in the second row, striking over the heads of their comrades and breaking the enemy's formation. In individual combat, they relied on aggressive pressure, giving the enemy no time to counterattack. It was the choice of the strongest and most confident warriors. The axe handle was made from carefully selected wood, most often ash or elm, which had high elasticity. It had to dampen the vibration from the blow so as not to dry out the fighter's hands, and at the same time not break under enormous loads. The handle could reach a length of 1.5 meters, which provided enormous leverage and increased the force of the blow many times over. Attaching the blade to the handle was also a special art, eliminating play or slippage at the most crucial moment. Interestingly, the blade was often made of soft iron, and only the cutting edge itself was welded with a strip of high-carbon hard steel. This design made the axe resistant to impact. The soft body absorbed the load, and the hard edge retained its sharpness for a long time. This was an example of the rational use of expensive materials and a deep understanding of metallurgy. It was extremely difficult to break such an axe in battle, which made it a reliable companion on long campaigns. Battle axes were often decorated with silver inlays, but these decorations never interfered with the functionality of the weapon. The patterns were applied to the flat surface of the blade without affecting the cutting edge or weakening the structure. This emphasized the owner's status, showing that he could afford to turn a utilitarian object into a work of art. At the same time, the splendor of the decorated axe could psychologically intimidate the enemy, demonstrating the Vikings' wealth and power. There were also one-handed axes, which were used in conjunction with a shield and were more versatile. They were lighter, faster, and allowed the warrior to maneuver actively while protecting himself from blows. The technique of using such an axe included not only chopping blows, but also hooks, jabs with the upper edge of the blade, and even throwing at short distances. It was a weapon for maneuverable combat, raids and skirmishes in the confined space of a ship or house. The axe became a symbol of the era not only because of its effectiveness, but also because of its accessibility and intimidating aura. It embodied the spirit of the North, rough, straightforward, indestructible, and merciless to weakness. In the hands of a master, it became a whirlwind of steel capable of grinding down any defense. In the next chapter, we will discuss what served as the main defense against this devastating weapon. Guess how long it took to make this? A Viking shield is not just a bunch of boards knocked together, but a complex engineering structure that required knowledge, experience, and time to create. It was the main element of defense, but in the hands of an experienced warrior, it turned into an active offensive weapon. The Scandinavian round shield was designed to be light, flexible, and maneuverable, allowing the fighter to control the course of the battle. Its design was the result of centuries of evolution and perfectly suited the fighting style of the era. The shield was made of softwood planks, most often linden, pine, or spruce, fitted together with precision. The choice of softwood was not accidental. Unlike hard oak, which could split from a strong blow, linden was resilient. When struck with a sword or axe, the blade often got stuck in the fibers of the tough wood, momentarily disarming the opponent. At this moment, the shield's owner could make a sharp lunge, snatching the weapon from the enemy's hands or striking back. In the center of the shield was a metal umbo, a hemispherical bowl that protected the warrior's hand holding the handle. But the umbo served not only for protection, it was a hard steel fist that could deliver crushing blows to the enemy's face or body. In close combat, when the distance was reduced to a minimum, a blow with the umbo could be as effective as a blow with a hammer. This turned defense into offense, making the shield a dangerous melee weapon. Particular attention was paid to the edging of the shield, which was usually made of rawhide stitched with strong threads or tendons. As the leather dried, it tightened the boards, creating a tense, monolithic structure capable of withstanding enormous loads. The edging protected the edge of the shield from chopping blows, preventing it from splitting and falling apart after the first few collisions. Often, the leather was laid in several layers, creating a durable bumper that absorbed shocks. The diameter of the shield varied from 80 to 90 centimeters, which allowed it to cover the warrior's body from shoulder to hip. At the same time, the shield was light enough to be held at arm's length and actively manipulated. The warrior did not hide passively behind the shield, but met blows, deflected them to the side, and created angles for attack. Constant movement of the shield prevented the enemy from taking aim and finding a breach in the defense. The front side of the shield was often covered with leather or thick fabric, which was then painted. The covering served as an additional reinforcing layer, preventing splinters and holding the boards together even when severely damaged. The painting on the shield had a sacred meaning. Geometric patterns and solar symbols, such as whirlpool wheels, served as talismans. Bright colors, red, white, and black, helped identify allies in the chaos of battle and intimidated enemies. The shield's handle, which ran across the boards on the inside, also served as a stiffener, reinforcing the entire structure. It had to be comfortable to grip, not slip in a sweaty palm, and withstand jerks and blows. The handle was often wrapped in leather or cloth for better grip and comfort. It is important to note that the shield was held with a fist grip on the central handle rather than worn on the forearm, which allowed for great freedom of movement. Shields were expendable items of war. They broke, were chopped up, and became unusable after a single serious battle. Therefore, a warrior always had to be able to quickly repair his shield or replace it with a new one. During sea voyages, shields were attached along the sides of the Drakkar, providing additional protection from arrows and waves and freeing up space on the deck. This famous image of the shield wall was not just decoration, but had a purely practical significance. Shield tactics included blocking, deflecting blows, thrusting, and striking with the edge. The sharp edge of the shield could be used to deliver a painful blow to the neck or limbs, while the flat surface could be used to knock an opponent off their feet or throw them off balance. In a dense formation, a wall of shields, each warrior covered the edge of his neighbor, creating an insurmountable barrier for the enemy. This required coordination and trust, turning a group of individuals into a single organism. Thus, the shield was the foundation of the Viking combat system, combining simplicity of materials and ingenuity of engineering. It allowed them to survive a hail of arrows and blows, enabling them to approach the enemy at a distance where they could strike with a sword or axe. Don't forget to like this if you are impressed by the sophistication of this seemingly simple design. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of the Vikings' main weapon? Swords were expensive, axes were brutal, but it was the spear that was the most widespread, versatile, and deadly weapon of that era. It was accessible to everyone, from noble jarls to simple bonds, and its effectiveness was unmatched. The spear allowed you to strike the enemy while remaining out of reach of their blade, control the distance, and deliver lightning-fast strikes. In mythology, Odin himself, the supreme god, wielded the spear Gungnir, which emphasized the sacred status of this type of weapon. Scandinavian spears were distinguished by a huge variety of shapes and sizes of spearheads, each of which had its own purpose. There were light throwing spears with narrow spearheads designed for long-range combat and piercing chainmail. There were heavy spears with wide, leaf-shaped blades that could not only stab, but also deliver terrible cutting blows. Some tips had special wings at the base to prevent too deep penetration and allow the spear to be used to deflect enemy shields. The spear shaft was made of ash wood, which in Norse mythology was the axis of the world, Yggdrasil. Ash wood has a unique combination of flexibility and strength, which allowed the shaft to bend under load but not break. The length of the spear could vary from 2 to 3 meters, which gave the advantage of the first strike in a duel with a swordsman or axeman. The surface of the shaft was carefully sanded so that the hand could slide freely along it when changing grip. The technique of spearmanship was incredibly developed and included strikes with 1 and 2 hands. In close formation, spears were wielded from behind the first row, creating a wall of stabs that was impossible to approach. In one-on-one combat, a warrior used all the advantages of length, constantly changing the level of attack, from the legs to the face. An experienced spearman could keep several opponents at a distance, preventing them from approaching. The ability to throw a spear while running, jumping, or with both hands at the same time was considered a special skill. Sagas tell of heroes who could catch a spear thrown at them in mid-air and throw it back at the enemy. This required phenomenal reflexes and coordination, turning combat into a deadly dance. Throwing spears were often carried in bundles of several pieces, using them to weaken the enemy's formation before hand-to-hand combat. The attachment of the tip to the shaft was a critical joint. It was set on rivets, often decorated with silver or copper. The joint was sometimes wrapped with leather or metal strips to prevent the tip from being cut off by an enemy sword. This made the weapon more reliable and durable in prolonged battles. The balance of the spear was carefully calibrated so that the tip did not outweigh the shaft and tire the arm prematurely. The spear was the ideal weapon for naval combat, allowing enemies on neighboring ships or landing on shore to be struck. It could not only be used to stab, but also to hook the sides of ships, pull them closer, or push off from the bottom in shallow water. This versatility made it an indispensable companion on any expedition. It should not be forgotten that the production of a spear required much less metal than the forging of a sword, which made it economically advantageous. At the same time, the combat effectiveness of a spear against an unprotected or lightly armored enemy was absolute. One accurate thrust could decide the outcome of a battle faster than a long exchange of sword blows. The psychological effect of a wall of spears aimed at the enemy was overwhelming. This sight stopped even the most daring cavalry. Horses refused to walk on sharp spikes, and the infantry understood that breaking through this forest would only be possible at the cost of enormous losses. The spear remained the king of battle throughout the Viking Age, despite the popularity of other weapons. But was the spear the only long weapon used by the Northerners? In the Viking Age, the sword was much more than just a weapon. It was a symbol of power, wealth, and membership in the elite. Unlike the axe or spear, the sword was designed exclusively for killing people, and this fact gave it a special, sinister aura. A good blade cost a fortune, comparable to the value of several farms or a large herd of cattle. Only Jarls, the king's warriors, and the most fortunate warriors could afford such a weapon. The design of the Carolingian sword, the most common type during that era, was aimed at combining cutting and stabbing capabilities. The wide blade with parallel edges and a rounded tip was primarily intended for powerful cutting blows. A deep groove in the center of the blade reduced weight and increased rigidity, functioning like a stiffener in modern engineering. This made the sword light enough, about 1 to 1.2 klet, for long battles without losing its penetrating power. Blades stamped with the Ulfbert mark, which were made from the highest quality crucible steel, were particularly renowned. The secret of this steel, which was virtually free of slag and impurities, was centuries ahead of its time. Such swords possessed incredible strength and flexibility, did not break when striking helmets and shields, and retained their sharpness for a long time. Possession of an Ulfbert was a sign of the highest military quality, analogous to owning an elite supercar today. The sword's hilt consisted of a short guard, a grip, and a massive pommel that served as a counterweight to the blade. The pommel was often decorated with intricate inlays of precious metals, geometric patterns, and animal motifs. The sword's balance was shifted closer to the hilt, making it more manageable and alive in the hand. The short guard did not interfere with the movements of the wrist, allowing strikes to be delivered from the most unexpected angles. Swords were passed down through generations, becoming steeped in legends and names. Names such as Legbiter or Battleflame inspired awe. It was believed that an old sword retained the fury of all previous battles and helped its new owner. The loss of a family sword was a tragedy, a stain on the reputation of the entire clan that could only be washed away with blood. The sword sheath was made of wood covered with leather and lined with fur or oiled wool. The fur protected the polished steel from moisture and rust, and the oil lubricated the blade every time it was removed or put back. Rich bandages and belts decorated with bronze overlays complemented the warrior's image, emphasizing the value of the weapons he carried. In battle, the sword was used in conjunction with the shield, using it to block and create gaps in the enemy's defense. Strikes were delivered in series, combining slashing attacks to the limbs and torso with shield strikes. The sword was not used for fencing in the blade-to-blade style, as in the movies, as this would damage the expensive sharpening. Blows were taken on the shield or dodged, saving the precious steel for the enemy's body. The blacksmithing of that era reached the heights of mastery in the techniques of Damascus steel and pattern welding. Blacksmiths wove rods of different metals together, forging them to create mesmerizing patterns on the blade, reminiscent of flowing water or snakeskin. This was not only beautiful but also functional, as it combined hard and soft grades of steel for strength. The sword was the final argument in a dispute, an instrument of justice and retribution. People swore allegiance on it, it was awarded for valor, and it was placed in the grave with the warrior so that he could fight in Valhalla. It was a cult object around which the entire life of a professional warrior was built. However, even if a warrior lost his sword, spear, and axe, he always had one last chance for salvation. What was this weapon that hung from the belt of every free man? Are you ready for the shocking truth about a knife that was more dangerous than a sword? In the shadow of majestic swords and loud axes lurked the modest but deadly Scrummus axe, or simply the sax. It was an imposing combat knife carried by every free man, and often even women. In close combat, when long weapons became useless, or when a shield was broken, it was the sax that decided who would live, and who would go to the gods. The sax was a single-edged blade with a thick butt and a straight or slightly curved cutting edge. The length of the blade could vary from a small utility knife to an almost short sword called a langsax. The thick butt allowed for powerful chopping blows capable of piercing leather armor or splitting a helmet. The tip was often beveled, which gave the blade excellent piercing properties when thrusting. This weapon did not require complex maintenance and was extremely reliable due to its massiveness and simplicity. The sax usually had no guard, which made it easy to hide under clothing or quickly draw from its sheath. The handle was made of wood, bone, or horn, providing a secure grip even with wet or bloody hands. The sax sheath was attached horizontally to the belt, which was a characteristic feature of the fashion of the time. In battle, the sax was used as a left-hand weapon in combination with a sword, or as the main weapon in the confines of a wall of shields. It could be used to strike from below the edge of the shield, hitting the enemy's legs or groin, or to strike from above at the neck and shoulders. Its compact size allowed it to be used in close combat, where the enemy's long weapons became a hindrance. It was dirty, brutal work that required composure and a willingness to engage in close contact. The sax was also a versatile tool for survival on campaigns and in everyday life. It was used to chop branches for a fire, cut up game, repair equipment, and perform hundreds of other tasks. This constant practice made the knife an extension of the hand, familiar and easy to use. A warrior knew his sax down to the smallest notch and could wield it in complete darkness. Richly decorated saxes with copper and silver inlays on the blade also served as status symbols. Runic inscriptions, owners' names, or magic formulas were often engraved on the blades. This turned a utilitarian object into a personal talisman that protected its owner from misfortune. But even the simplest, roughly forged knife was a formidable weapon in skilled hands. Psychologically, having a sax on his belt gave a warrior the confidence that he would never be completely unarmed. Even if caught off guard, without chainmail or a shield, he could sell his life dearly. This weapon of last resort often became a weapon of victory when all other means had been exhausted. Knife fighting techniques were not taught as systematically as spear fighting. They were based on intuition and brutal experience. Strikes were short, sharp, and aimed at vulnerable points not protected by armor. In ground combat, when fighters were entangled in a tangle of bodies, it was the sax that put an end to the fight. History knows many examples when noble warriors neglected this simple weapon and paid for it with their lives. The Vikings, being pragmatists, never parted with their knives. For them, the sax was a faithful friend who was always there, from the cradle to the funeral pyre. We have talked about close combat, but how did the Vikings fight at a distance when the enemy was still far away? In the next chapter, we will discuss a weapon that is often unfairly considered a weapon of cowards. Archery in the Viking Age is often thought of as a hunting activity, but in war, the bow was a fearsome instrument. Long before the shield walls closed in, the air was filled with the whistling of feathered arrows, bringing death from a distance. Skilled archers could thin the enemy's ranks, wound commanders, and sow chaos even before hand-to-hand combat began. In naval battles, where ships approached each other slowly, the exchange of fire could last for hours, deciding the outcome of the battle without boarding. Scandinavian bows were made primarily from yew, a wood with natural elasticity and strength. These were simple but powerful longbows, often exceeding the height of the archer himself. The tension of such bows could reach impressive levels, requiring enormous physical strength and years of training from the archer. The bowstring had to be pulled not only with the hands, but also with the back, using the whole body as a lever. Arrowheads had different shapes depending on the target. Wide ones for striking unprotected people and animals, narrow-faceted ones for piercing chainmail and shields. Craftsmen were able to create arrowheads that, once they hit their target, could not be removed without serious surgery. The arrow feathers were made from birds of prey, which ensured stable flight and accuracy. Each arrow was a valuable resource that was collected after battle for reuse. The tactics of using archers were flexible. They could operate in scattered formation, hiding behind folds in the terrain, or shoot from behind their comrades. On ships, archers took up positions on the bow and stern, firing accurately at the deck of the enemy ship. The main goal was to suppress the enemy, forcing them to take cover behind their shields and lose their maneuverability. A dense shower of arrows created a zone of death that was impossible to cross unscathed. The Vikings did not consider archery to be the preserve of the weak. Many famous kings were excellent archers. The sagas extol the accuracy of heroes capable of hitting the smallest gap in armor or knocking an enemy off the mast of a swaying ship. This art required cold calculation, a keen eye and a steady hand, qualities highly valued in the North. The bow was a weapon of the intellect, capable of taking into account wind, distance, and the movement of the target. There were also specific techniques, such as shooting overhead so that the arrows fell on the enemy from above, over the edge of their shields. This was especially effective against dense formations, where warriors could not raise their shields above their heads without exposing their bodies. Such volleys caused panic and broke the formation, making it vulnerable to infantry attacks. Quivers for arrows were made of leather or birch bark and worn on a belt or on the back, providing quick access to ammunition. An experienced archer had a high rate of fire, able to shoot up to 10 arrows per minute, creating a continuous stream of fire. In skilled hands, the bow became the machine gun of the Middle Ages, preventing the enemy from raising their heads. However, humidity and cold could negatively affect the bowstring, made of sinew or flax, so the bow was carefully maintained. It was stored in cases, lubricated with grease, and protected from moisture, as it was understood that lives depended on its serviceability. In the conditions of sea voyages, this was a difficult task that required discipline. Bows and arrows were an integral part of the arsenal, complementing the power of axes and spears. They allowed the Vikings to control the battlefield at all distances, leaving no safe zones for the enemy. This was a manifestation of a total approach to warfare, where all available means were used to achieve victory. The individual skill of the Vikings was great, but the real strength of the northern armies lay in their ability to fight together. The Wall of Shields, or Skjaldborg, was not just a tactical formation, but a philosophy of collective survival. The warriors stood shoulder to shoulder, covering the edges of their neighbors' shields and creating a monolithic, scaly barrier. In this formation, personal glory took a back seat, giving way to responsibility for the comrades on the right and left. Building the wall required strict discipline and long joint training sessions to act as a single organism. The warriors had to breathe in unison, move synchronously, and maintain formation under the tremendous pressure of enemy attacks. Any gap in the wall instantly became a target for enemy spears and axes. Therefore, the most experienced and heavily armed fighters, capable of withstanding the first, most terrible onslaught, were placed in the front row. The Wall of Shields was not static. It could move, advance, retreat, and even change shape, turning into a wedge or a boar. This formation, called Svinfjolking, was used to break through enemy lines with a powerful ram. The tip of the wedge, consisting of berserkers or the best warriors, cut into the enemy ranks, splitting them in two. The rest of the warriors widened the breach, destroying the enemy piece by piece. There was a clear division of roles within the formation. The front row defended with shields, while the second row struck with spears and axes over their heads. The rear rows pressed down on the front rows, creating a physical mass capable of knocking the enemy over. It was not just a battle with swords, but a power struggle, a crush, where weight and pressure were no less important than the sharpness of steel. Those who fell in such a crush had virtually no chance of getting up. Commands in the noise of battle were transmitted by horns, banners, and loud shouts from commanders standing behind the ranks or on the flanks. The ability to hear and follow orders in the chaos of battle was a vital skill. A disciplined wall could withstand a numerically superior but disorganized enemy, grinding it down wave after wave. It was a death machine that worked without fail. The cohesion was strengthened by the fact that relatives, friends, and neighbors from the same village often stood in the same ranks. They fought not for an abstract king, but for the life of a brother or father standing next to them. This created an incredibly high morale that could not be broken by fear. Betrayal or cowardice in such a collective was unthinkable, as it meant death for everyone. Against cavalry, the Wall of Shields turned into a fortress bristling with spears, against which cavalry attacks were shattered. Horses could not jump over the solid barrier, and riders could not reach the infantry. This made the foot-bound Vikings a formidable force even against the elite knights of continental Europe. Breaking through the enemy's Wall of Shields was the main objective of the battle. Axes were used to pull the shields apart, along with throwing weapons. Once the formation broke down, chaotic slaughter ensued, in which the Vikings felt right at home. But as long as the wall stood, it was impregnable. A weapon is useless without the hand that wields it, and the Vikings understood this perfectly, turning their bodies into perfect instruments of war. Their physical training was inextricably linked to their daily lives, full of hard work and struggle against the elements. Rowing a draka for hours, and sometimes days, developed incredible endurance, a powerful back, and an iron grip. These muscles, accustomed to fighting the waves, were ideal for wielding a heavy axe or holding a shield. Training began in childhood in the form of games, running on the oars of a moving ship, wrestling, throwing stones and logs. These games developed the balance, coordination, and explosive power needed in battle. The ability to maintain balance on a slippery deck or wet grass was often a decisive factor in survival. Vikings were athletes for whom agility was as important as brute strength. Special attention was paid to swimming, which was rare in medieval Europe. The ability to swim in cold water and even fight in it gave them an advantage in sea landings and shipwrecks. The sagas mention competitions in breath-holding and underwater wrestling, demonstrating the phenomenal capabilities of their bodies. This tempered not only the body but also the spirit, teaching them to endure cold and discomfort. Wrestling, known as glima, was a popular sport and a method of training for unarmed close combat. It taught how to use an opponent's weight against them, knock them off their feet, and control them on the ground. These skills were indispensable in the confines of combat when weapons were lost or broken. Glima cultivated a sense of distance and tactile perception of the opponent. The warrior's diet, rich in protein, fish, meat, and complex carbohydrates, promoted muscle growth and sustained energy. Despite the harsh conditions, their diet was balanced and high in calories, providing fuel for the war machine. They knew the value of rest and sleep, knowing how to recover their strength in any conditions, even on damp ground or on deck. Psychological training included skaldic poetry, glorifying feats of valor, and a belief in predestination. This removed the blocks of fear and uncertainty, allowing them to perform at the limits of human capability. Warriors entered a state of combat trance, where fatigue and pain receded into the background. The ability to endure injuries and continue fighting was also part of their training and mentality. They treated pain as an inevitable companion of life without making a tragedy out of it. This stoic endurance frightened their enemies, who thought that the Northerners were made of iron, not flesh. Thus, the Viking himself was the main weapon, and the sword or axe was merely an attachment to this living mechanism. Their bodies were forged by nature and labor, hardened by the sea and discipline. They were biological war machines that knew no wear and tear. To conclude our journey, we must look into the very heart of warrior culture, the smithy. In Viking society, the blacksmith was an almost mythical figure, on a par with shamans and skalds. He commanded the elements, transforming bog ore and coal into shining steel, capable of taking lives. The process of creating weapons was shrouded in mystery and rituals designed to imbue the blade with magical power. Extracting iron from bog ore was a laborious and lengthy process requiring enormous amounts of charcoal. The metal obtained was heterogeneous, and the blacksmith had to forge it repeatedly to remove slag. It was a struggle with the material that required patience, strength, and a deep understanding of the structure of metal. Each blow of the hammer compacted the iron, making it stronger and better. The carbonization technology allowed soft iron to be transformed into hard steel, capable of holding a sharp edge. Blacksmiths used animal bones, and even those of their ancestors, for cementation, believing that the spirit of the beast or human would pass into the blade. Modern science confirms that calcium and phosphorus from bones did indeed improve the properties of steel, making this ritual not just superstition, but primitive chemistry. Welding packages of different metals to create patterned blades was the pinnacle of blacksmithing. This required precise temperature control so that the layers would weld together but not melt or burn. The result was a blade that combined the hardness of the edge with the elasticity of the core, which did not break in the cold. The visual beauty of the patterns was only a side effect of technological perfection. Hardening the blade was the most critical moment. Overheat it and the steel would become brittle. Underheat it and it would become soft. Blacksmiths determined the temperature by the color of the red-hot metal, relying on their eyes and generations of experience. Cooling was done in water, oil, or even blood, which gave the process a mystical touch. It was believed that at this moment, the sword's soul entered it. The handles and scabbards were made by craftsmen of other specialties using wood, leather, bone, and precious metals. The assembly of the sword was the final chord, bringing all the elements together into a single whole. Perfect balance, comfortable grip, secure fastening. All this was checked repeatedly. The finished weapon underwent rigorous testing before reaching the customer. The weapons outlived their creators and owners, becoming witnesses to history. Swords were found in swamps, burial mounds, and at the bottom of rivers, where they lay for centuries, retaining their shape and predatory beauty. They are silent storytellers of a time when the skill of a blacksmith was valued above gold. Each blade that has come down to us is imbued with the labor, sweat, and genius of ancient masters. These are not just artifacts, but the philosophy of a people frozen in metal, a people who knew how to create perfection in the harsh conditions of the North. We have immersed ourselves in a world where the clang of steel was the music of life, and weapons were a man's faithful companion from birth to death. The Viking arsenal was not just a set of tools for killing, it was a complex system that combined technology, tactics, faith, and physical training. Axes capable of splitting shields, spears that never missed their mark, and swords imbued with spirit. All these were parts of a whole that allowed the Northerners to leave an indelible mark on history. Their legacy teaches us that superiority is achieved not only through strength, but also through intelligence, skill, and spirit. They proved that even simple materials in the hands of a professional can become an unbreakable force. The Viking era is gone, but the echo of their blows on shields still resonates in our culture, reminding us of a time when metal and man were one. Which Viking weapon did you find most impressive, and why? Would you like to see a separate episode about Draka ships? Write your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue exploring the mysteries of the past with us.